Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to Sister Wives with Mary Jane K. Today, I'll be breaking down Seeking Sister Wife, Season 4, Episode 9. You want all the juicy details? The episode opens with Sidian and Ariel. They've really hit it off, and Sidian feels great about the way things are progressing. He set up a campfire on the beach for Ariel, and Sidian hopes Ariel becomes a wife and a sister wife to Tasha. Ariel feels things are going well, so she would be happy to continue being intimate with Sidian. So Ariel's happy to have sex with Sidian, but will she want to become Sidian's wife and Tasha's sister wife? They have the fire going and they could face the ocean and the fire. Instead, they have their backs to the ocean, facing the fire exclusively. In my opinion, it's weird. I'd sit facing the fire so I could see the ocean as well. Otherwise, what's the point of doing the fire on the beach where you can see the ocean as the sun is setting? During this fire on the shore by the ocean, they have their backs to for no reason. Tasha calls. She says this is the longest that she and Sidian have been apart. And she knows it sounds selfish because Ariel waited a really long time. It's been a while. And Tasha feels really lonely without Sidian by her side. Ariel reassures Tasha that it's okay to feel lonely. Sidian will be home in just a few days. Ariel says she loves Tasha and she doesn't want her to feel sad. It's the last thing she wants. She feels she stole Sidian away from Tasha for a few days, and it makes her feel sad. Sidian tells Tasha for him and Ariel, she is still a huge part of this. Tasha knows. She says it's harder without him there. Tasha asks if Sidian and Ariel feel like they've bonded. Sidian assures Tasha that he and Ariel are having a great time. Sidian says they both feel like it couldn't be better. Ariel tells Tasha she's having a great time. Sidian is very funny. He makes her laugh. Tasha asks if the lovebirds have had sex yet. Sidian asks if she wants all the juicy details. Tasha says only if they are comfortable with telling her. Sidian says they did have sex, and he asks Tasha what she wants to know about it. Tasha wants to know if they were at that comfort level. She feels bad. She thinks she should have spoken more with Ariel about it to let her know she was comfortable with it. Ariel says it's kind of weird to share with Tasha that they have been intimate, but because she makes sure that Ariel is okay with everything, Ariel then feels comfortable talking with Tasha about it. Ariel tells Tasha she hopes she knows they will always consider her feelings in this relationship and that they will always ask for her consent and they will make sure Tasha is always okay with everything. And Tasha promises to do the same for Ariel. Sidian says Tasha felt lonely while he has been gone and he feels bad about it. He says it's one of the challenges that comes with the lifestyle. Sidian wishes he could be two people so he could be with Tasha and he could be with Ariel at once. I'd say give it less than a century. They've already started with cloning pets. Pretty soon they'll be able to clone polygamous husbands and this won't even be an obstacle of the lifestyle. Or Sidian can always make a hologram. Guess what? In monogamy, you don't have to wish that you are two people and you don't always have a spouse or a partner who feels lonely when you're off with the other wife or partner. Sidian hopes over the next couple of days he gets with Ariel that they can solidify the bond they have and that nothing comes up to put a rift between them. Next up are the Merryfields. Sam, Danielle's brother, wanted to have a conversation with her, so they have met up for coffee. Danielle is excited to meet her brother because they don't usually get much time to talk with just the two of them. Danielle is leaving Saturday to go to Brazil with Garrick to see Roberta, and she is apprehensive about the trip for many reasons. It's been so long since she has seen Roberta. She feels like there are a lot of tough conversations they need to have. So it's not just going to be a fun trip. She says the best case outcome of this trip would be Bert coming home to the U.S. with them, or that Roberta books a ticket to fly over, and the Merryfields have a guarantee of when she is coming to the U.S. The worst case outcome is Roberta saying she doesn't want to come. Danielle confides in Sam that she's worried about how it will go because she and Garrick have asked Roberta a few times to please book her ticket. And she still hasn't opened up and said, yes, I'll come in a week or I'm coming on this day. And it wears on both Danielle and Garrick. So Danielle is worried going out there how it will be. And she wonders if Roberta will actually commit. Sam wonders if Roberta is nervous about coming to the U.S. or if Roberta might not be sure she wants to come to the U.S. since she is pushing it that far. Danielle says Roberta has had her doubts and she's had her questions about moving to the U.S. in the past. When they went to California to see Leah, they were having a really hard 3 months of Roberta saying she didn't know if she was going to come to the U.S. at all. Roberta didn't want to leave her mom, and Danielle gets that it's very hard, but at the same time, they're all committed to each other, so it was hard to go through that. And now, with Roberta not committing to the ticket, it has that same vibe. And Danielle wonders, is Roberta really going to come? Is she really committing? Danielle thinks since they met Roberta, there have been moments of doubts. Doubts about sending Roberta money, doubts about if Roberta is really committed to them. Danielle says there have been a lot of excuses throughout the relationship. Not just communication and why Roberta can't communicate, but why she can't do certain things, like why she can't get papers to the immigration lawyer, for example. Danielle says it's coming to a head right now, and Roberta has to make a choice. She has to decide to book the flight and leave. It won't be easy for Roberta, but Danielle says it would be devastating if she didn't come. Danielle doesn't even want to think about it. It hurts her heart to even consider Roberta not coming to the U.S. Sam asks if Danielle thinks Roberta will really come. Danielle hopes so, but she definitely has doubts. She's in the middle. She doesn't know which way it's going to go. Danielle knows Bert is a different person than she is, and in her character, she is very different from Danielle. But Danielle says if it was her in Roberta's place, she would have booked a ticket the day her visa got approved. And because Danielle is that way, she guesses she projects that onto Roberta. Danielle doesn't fully understand why Roberta is having such a hard time with this. Danielle tells Sam she and Garrick are going to Brazil to have that interaction and to tell Roberta, hey, we have to do this. She says if God forbid Roberta doesn't come at that point, it has to be over. Sam's biggest concern for Garrick and Danielle is for their emotions and for their boys also and for their whole family. He is concerned that if Roberta doesn't come or if she doesn't commit, that it would be very emotionally taxing on their whole family. Sam tells Danielle it's not easy if you have kids, or if Roberta and Garrick have a kid together, not being able to have that support. Danielle tells Sam that reminds her that Garrick brought up trying for babies again. Sam asks his sister if Garrick is going to try to have a baby with Roberta now when it doesn't even seem she is fully committed. He tells Danielle they have to wait till Roberta is here in the U.S. and until they know she's committed. He tells Danielle to try for a baby when they go to Brazil on this trip is nuts. Danielle agrees. She tells Sam she needs to talk to Garrick about that because she doesn't feel comfortable with Roberta and Garrick trying for babies again on this trip to Brazil. She doesn't feel comfortable with them trying for babies until Roberta is in the U.S. Sam says he doesn't even think that should be a question, and Danielle agrees. Sam says if Garrick tries for a baby and Roberta doesn't want to come to the U.S., if Garrick has a baby in Brazil, then he might want to move down there, and then Sam would feel Garrick is just being selfish. Danielle thinks it's important for her to touch base with Garrick. She wants to be sure that they are both on the same page before going to Brazil. And she wants to bring up these points like waiting to try for babies till Roberta is in the U.S. Sam hopes Roberta does come to the U.S., but he definitely has his doubts. What's interesting is when Danielle was expressing her list of doubts, she mentioned doubts about sending Roberta money. Roberta might have zero intention to relocate, and she could be playing the long con, milking Garrick and Danielle for all they're worth. And the lack of communication, in my opinion, is probably because Roberta feels guilty because she knows she isn't coming to the U.S. and she probably has no intention. I think Garrick knows Roberta might not come. There's a strong chance she won't come, but he's pussy whipped, so he wants to get Roberta pregnant in the U.S. or in Brazil because he wants to keep her. And I don't think he cares if he has one family in Brazil and one in the U.S. He just wants to have kids upon kids and more than one wife for his own selfish reasons, in my opinion. And I also wonder how much money has Garrick sent Roberta? Is he paying for Roberta's whole existence in Brazil, I wonder? Next up are the Epps family. Marcus explains last night he went on a date with Janae. He flew her in from Atlanta to see if she was a good fit for their family. But things didn't go exactly the way Marcus planned them to go. Janae didn't fall into his arms and fall in love with the idea of polygamy. So when it comes to winning Janae over, Marcus needs to talk about it with Taryn and India, his wives. India asks how the date was. She joins Marcus and Taryn, who just woke up, in their bed to ask. Marcus says it was the craziest date he ever went on in his life. He reveals to Taryn and India that his plan to reveal his lifestyle at the end of the date was torpedoed because he asked Janae what she had going on in Atlanta. He answered, and then she asked Marcus what he had going on. Marcus was pissed because this wasn't the plan, but he wasn't going to lie. Marcus explains that he told Janae the woman he was on the outs with, Taryn, came back, and how during that time he met Janae, he also met India. India explains when Marcus first brought the idea of polygamy to her, they were just having a regular conversation, and Marcus laid out what he thought. And Janae was coming in a blank slate. So if India were to put herself in Janae's shoes, thinking she is dating a single man who reveals he has not one but two wives, she doesn't know how open she herself would be to that. Marcus tells Taryn and India everything he said. Janae was shutting it down. She immediately said no, and she told Marcus he should have told her before she came. Taryn says, in comparison to Janae's reaction, her reaction of Marcus bringing up polygamy is different because she had known Marcus for so long at that point when he finally proposed the idea to her. Taryn didn't expect it, but it also wasn't a surprise. Marcus suggested to Janae that she sleeps on it and that she processes it. And in a couple of weeks, he said he will book her another flight and she will either get on the flight or she won't get on the flight. Why the fuck would Marcus even think she would get on the flight? He's manipulative. He's not charming unless it's to get what he wants from women and the people around him. He isn't attractive, in my opinion. He's incredibly self-serving. And he thinks he's God's gift to women too. He wasted Janae's time from her one life that she has because he felt it was his best opportunity to get what he wanted out of Janae. That's why he felt it was justifiable to waste her time and not tell her on the phone so he could create an opportunity to try and get what he wanted from Janae. So is Marcus putting his interests first or what is best for Janae first? Obviously, he could have called her before she wastes her time to let her know his situation. But he didn't do that because it wasn't in his best interest, even if that was in Janae's best interest. Marcus is doing this on date 1 to Janae. He will do it all the time. That's Marcus's nature, in my opinion. Marcus says Janae never got to a point where he thought Janae would get. She didn't get to the place of beginning to ask how all of this would work. Why can't Marcus understand? That's because she realizes she doesn't want him and he isn't worth it. He is so arrogant. He thought he could waste Janae's time and drop a bomb that he has not one, but 2 wives, and that she would think he was worth her taking less she deserves. He's so arrogant and he's not very self-aware, in my opinion. And if he cared about Janae, he would have called her and told her before wasting her time. He brought her there believing he was available and single. He knew he wasn't, and he expects her to accept sharing her man to have him, that he is worth accepting polygamy and her sharing her man. He's short, not that that matters, but he's very short. He's arrogant, he's manipulative, he's ego-driven, he's selfish, and he seems to really overestimate himself. A viewer I really appreciate, Diana, gave me a heads up because I don't check out entertainment news at all. I don't check out social media at all. I don't even like to look at the actual news more than once a week because obviously it's good to be informed, but it's all fear and doom and gloom and negative vibes and an agenda. So I don't like to put any of that stuff in my environment because I have one life, and in my opinion, that's not for me. But Diana gave me a heads up about Marcus. So I Googled and I checked out a few sources, and allegedly, and this is only allegedly, Marcus has 10 kids. He has a past DV situation, and Marcus and Taryn had a party at a warehouse that was foreclosed on by the government, and he threw a party there illegally, and a young lady got shot after a loser who wasn't let in shot through the window. So because Marcus wanted to throw a party on the cheap and cut corners and probably make money and hustle on the side, in the process, a young lady has no life. So if I was Marcus, I'd worry more about my 10 kids and being a present father or helping the young lady's family over getting cake and lust and living polygamy or being on a TLC reality show. If I was Marcus, I wouldn't worry about where I can stick my dick. I would worry about these other things, but that's just my opinion. He has 10 kids and he seems more worried about finding cake, and this lifestyle is a bullshit excuse for Marcus to continue to satisfy his ego and his lust and his arrogance. It's not at all about the way he wants to set up his family. This is all about Marcus and his alleged shrimp dick, in my opinion. He's so gross. His whole priority is cake. All his life seems to be centered around cake. Maybe he should fly his kids in instead of these women he's trying to use and manipulate. Marcus complains that Janae never got to the place he thought she would have, asking how polygamy would work. Taryn says it was absolutely not from Janae, and Marcus says that's how it felt. Taryn suggests Marcus should give Janae some time and he should still chase her if he really feels like there is a connection there. If she said no, which she did, he shouldn't chase her. She isn't playing a game. I don't think she wants to be chased. Most men think women are just playing games, playing hard to get. If a woman says no, if a woman is clear, they mean it. Most of the time when a woman says no, they're not really playing a game or they're not playing hard to get. They actually just don't want you. These are not 20-year-olds who are playing games or who have cold feet. These are grown-ass women. It doesn't matter what connection Marcus may think he feels. She said no, and he needs to respect that. I don't think Taryn's advice is good that he should keep chasing her. Marcus may want her, but if she isn't down for his lifestyle and she says no, it's game over. I don't think she would want to be chased. Taryn suggests Marcus should try and still put in the effort. Delusional Marcus feels like he and Janae need more us time. He feels if they can magnify what's already there, then Janae won't be able to walk away from him. He suggests, just like India wasn't able to walk away from him. And India points out that that was after 3 years of being with him. India says Marcus better do a lot of wooing. This is gross. Janae said no, and I believe she means no. I don't think she wants to be wooed or chased. It's a crossing of boundaries, and she isn't playing hard to get. Even if she feels a connection with Marcus, she can easily find a monogamous man 1,000,000 times better than Marcus to have a connection with. She doesn't need this connection with Marcus and to accept polygamy. The connection isn't worth accepting a lifestyle, in my opinion. We know from last week's promo that Janae does show up again, but I have a feeling she's probably doing it for a TLC paycheck or to be able to rip Marcus a new one, but I doubt she's interested in polygamy or in Marcus. I don't think he's going to be able to woo Janae or manipulate her into getting attached to him and then accepting polygamy. Marcus is arrogant. He believes he's worth it, like he's something to write home about. And I think it's gross that his wives advise Marcus to continue to try and woo her when she said no. And in his arrogance, he believes genuinely that if he can connect with Janae and woo her, she will give in. It's gross that the wives are advising him to use wooing to manipulate Janae into accepting what she said no to, just because Marcus feels he wants cake. In my opinion, this connection is just Marcus wanting to taste the cake. That's all it is. Marcus says the next order of business is to put the ball in Janae's court. Marcus doesn't know if Janae is going to come around. Some of the things that Janae said make Marcus think there is absolutely no way she would ever be involved in polygamy. Marcus is hoping the charm and general connection between himself and Janae changes that. But at this point, Marcus really doesn't know where things will go. Next up are the Merryfields. Danielle comes home after coffee with Sam and she wants to talk to Garrick about some of the things her brother brought up. Danielle suggests they sit down and talk, and Garrick says okay. And I found this odd, but Danielle says thank you because Garrick says okay when she asks him to talk. I don't know if it was edited, but to me it's odd to thank your husband for agreeing to talk with you. If as a wife you have concerns and you ask your husband or your partner, your boyfriend, whatever to talk, it's a given that you will be talking. So why is she saying thank you for him agreeing to sit down and talk with her? It's odd, as if he doesn't have to say, yes, let's talk. If my boyfriend, husband, fiance, partner, whatever, came to me with concerns, I'd do it, of course, no question. I wouldn't expect a thank you. It would be a given that, of course, we're going to sit and talk. And I say, sure, let's talk. I want them to talk to me whenever they need to. It's no question. And I expect the same. The fact that Danielle says thank you after Garrick says okay struck me. Like, does Garrick sometimes say no when Danielle wants to talk? Or this is off limits? So when he is willing to talk, does Danielle feel the need to thank him because it doesn't happen all the time? Maybe it's just me, but it struck me as very odd. Danielle asks Garrick if he is excited for their trip. Of course, Garrick is excited to see his precious Bert, except for all the flying. Danielle is excited and nervous. She's nervous because she knows Garrick really misses Roberta. So there will be a lot of emotions going on, but they have to do a lot of logical discussions. There are a lot of logical things to discuss. Danielle tells Garrick, he mentioned trying for babies again when they go to Brazil. And she says her brother was talking about it and she realized it's probably not a good idea to try for a baby until Roberta is in the US. I think Danielle is afraid to directly say how she feels with Garrick. So she triangulates the brother in to make it easier for her to speak up as if it's not directly her concerns. Her brother mentioned it. And then she realized her concerns. That way Garrick will blame the brother if shit hits the fan and not Danielle. I think it's unhealthy to pin it on Sam making her realize her concerns when Danielle knows full well these are also her concerns. It throws her brother under the bus. And if Garrick flips, Danielle can say it was her brother's influence. She doesn't feel it and she can backpedal. Not healthy to triangulate. She should talk to her brother. They should always discuss her concerns. But when she talked to Garrick, she doesn't need to involve her brother and say that her brother has concerns. She should say, I have these concerns. I almost feel like she fears Garrick's reaction and she doesn't speak with conviction when she brings up her hesitations. It's like she's hesitant or nervous or scared to bring up her concerns. Garrick asks what 3 or 4 weeks will matter, and Danielle says it would give her more peace of mind to know Roberta is here with them and that they are a family and that they are together because there are fears and doubts that come. And she knows Roberta is also dealing with her own fears and doubts about leaving her mom. So Danielle thinks it would be better for all of them to wait for babies because if Roberta got pregnant far away, it could affect the whole family. Garrick says he guesses Danielle's brother is coming from the fear and the worry of Roberta isn't going to come. Danielle says there are those doubts even in her own mind. She says they don't know if Roberta will come here or book the plane ticket. So she thinks to go into this trip thinking it's a good idea to try for babies seems chaotic to her. Obviously, I agree with Danielle. Danielle tells Garrick if for some reason Bert didn't get to the U.S. with all they have put into this, if Roberta chose to stay in Brazil and not come to the U.S., it would be very hurtful. Garrick says that's not logical. Danielle explains that's where her concern comes in. She knows Roberta is dealing with her own struggles. Garrick says, say the worst case scenario is Roberta doesn't come to the U.S. If that happens, he asks, are we still not a family? Danielle says, yeah. Garrick asks, so should Roberta never have kids? Danielle asks Garrick if he would be okay with having kids with Roberta in Brazil. And Garrick says he wouldn't like that, but he asks, would I rather us start having kids? He asks, so do we wait 5 years to have kids? Danielle looks astounded and devastated. Her mouth is open, staring at Garrick after his answer. And Danielle explains she's shocked by Garrick's response. She says they have so much going on. If Roberta misses her visa cutoff, based on what the immigration lawyer told them, it's a minimum of 5 years before Roberta would even have hopes of coming to the U.S. And that's a slim chance that it would be possible. They will wonder why Roberta didn't use her visa the first time. Danielle tells Garrick it concerns her that he would be okay with having kids in another country. She says then they wouldn't be a family. And that's the whole reason they are living this way. To be a family. That's why they are living polygamy. She asks Garrick, right? In my opinion, no. That's why Danielle is accepting to live polygamously. This way, to keep her family intact. But Garrick is living polygamy for lust and ego reasons wrapped in God and his personal interpretation of the Bible and his midlife crisis. I think Garrick wants cake. He's probably having a midlife crisis and he wants more kids. For Garrick, it's about finding a new woman to have a family who excites him sexually, and it's about his selfish reasons. Danielle agreed to this. She divorced Garrick and tolerated this fuckery for her kids to keep her family together because I believe she loves Garrick and she wants to maintain the family. Let's see how Garrick responds to Danielle saying they are living this way to have a family, add to the family, and to be together. And Roberta having kids in Brazil and Garrick having a separate family in Brazil would defeat the purpose of why they are living polygamy. Danielle asks how Garrick would be a father if the kids were in Brazil. And Garrick says it wouldn't be easy. He says he wouldn't get to see his kids in Brazil for part of the year, and that would be hard. Danielle points out then Garrick also wouldn't get to see them for part of the year either. Garrick says Danielle is very emotional about the thought of kids in Brazil and Roberta there, and the family being split apart. But at the same time, Garrick feels they have to think of everything going on, and Roberta as well. And Garrick says Roberta is his family. He knows he and Roberta both really want to have kids. They want at least 2 or 3 kids. But this trip is primarily about getting Roberta a ticket. And that has to be sooner than 2 weeks from the expiration of her visa because of all the possible unforeseen circumstances that could possibly occur. Danielle tells Garrick they have to make a plan of what's best for the family because it's not just about Roberta, it's about all of them. Danielle tells Garrick it would be very hard for him to be a father in another country, and it would be hard on his sons in the U.S. as well. Garrick thinks it's something they have to talk to Bert about too. In my opinion, Garrick is more concerned with Roberta than Danielle or his sons in the U.S. It seems to me Roberta and having babies with her is Garrick's priority. Danielle says it's terrifying to her to hear Garrick say that he would have kids with Roberta in Brazil. In her heart, when she heard that, she felt, what? Danielle is in tears. This is devastating to her. She says to have children in another country and to have a family in the U.S. wonders if that means Garrick is giving up his life with them in the U.S. to stay in Brazil. Garrick explains to Danielle Roberta is a part of him too. And Danielle says she and Garrick have responsibilities in the U.S. They have certain things that they can do from afar, but that's a huge life-altering thing to say. Danielle gets that Roberta wants children, but she wonders at what cost. Danielle is breaking down now. She says she's emotionally overwhelmed, and understandably so. In my opinion, Danielle never really wanted polygamy, but she didn't want to divorce Garrick. Garrick was probably a loose cannon who would easily leave her and his family. He's selfish. He seems to put himself first. And just because he speaks in a creepy, soft-spoken way, it doesn't mean this guy isn't a huge, selfish, ego-driven dick behind closed doors. In my opinion, Garrick is scary. He speaks in that voice. But what is he really like when he's angry or behind closed doors when the cameras aren't rolling? Garrick probably wanted to separate, and Danielle knew that Garrick would leave. He proposed polygamy, flipping through the Bible, trying to find ways to justify it biblically. He met Bert, and Danielle legally divorced Garrick to allow Bert to get the visa, probably wanting to keep the family together for her kids. And I believe she really loves Garrick. Danielle probably thought eventually Garrick would snap out of it and he would realize he wanted his family. But what happened is Danielle gave up her legal status as his wife. They've done the visa. Roberta doesn't want to come to the U.S. and Garrick is selfish. Now Roberta is his family and his priority over the family he has right in front of him. Roberta takes priority. Being with her, having kids with her takes priority. Even if he has to go to Brazil and have kids over there. He wants Roberta no matter what. Notice his justification to Danielle is, Roberta is my family. And he also told cameras, Roberta is my family. I think Garrick would be fine divorcing Danielle and building a life with Roberta in Brazil. Danielle somehow felt she still had the upper hand and that she could keep Garrick in check. And now she's realizing Garrick could take her and the kids or leave them. But Roberta is his priority either way. Roberta is his family. Roberta is his priority. And Garrick sees it that way. So Roberta takes priority. He's pussy whipped. And I think he doesn't love Danielle the way she loves him. And now she sees Garrick would even have kids in Brazil. He would even leave his own sons behind. And she realizes, wow, I'm not as important as I thought I would be. I'm not a priority. Our sons aren't a priority to Garrick. And she's thinking, what the fuck? And Roberta, by the way, in my opinion, is probably using Garrick. Danielle mentioned sent money that she had doubts about. How much money? I think Roberta is using Garrick to take all she can. And if he wanted to move to Brazil and have kids with her, I really doubt that she would want him. I think Garrick's a fool who doesn't see the blessing he has right in front of him. He's a weak, naive man who prioritizes his dick, and he has a schoolgirl infatuation. But Roberta is just pulling the long con. I think initially, Roberta may have been more serious about committing. But once she saw they wanted a third wife, she realized, fuck this, I don't want this. If I was Danielle, I'd take my kids and make a life and let Garrick go to Brazil with Roberta. She doesn't want him. He'll be back soon anyway. I can't believe Garrick would be so selfish as to say his wife and kids in the U.S. matter less to him than Roberta being his family and him having kids with her. If I was Danielle, I would have been gone a long time ago. But I don't think she thought Garrick would do her and their sons this dirty. Next up, it's the Davis family. Nick, April, and Jennifer are going hiking to discuss taking the next step with Danielle. They always want to make sure they are all on the same page with every step they take. Nick tells April and Jen, even with all of the decisions of how their situation ends up, some of it is left up to chance to decide. April says it hasn't been that long a period of time with Danielle, but Jenny moved in with them pretty quickly. Nick says between the three of them, over the weekend, there were enough scenarios that came up that they got to have an idea of how well-rounded Danielle is in adjusting to how they live. Nick reminds April and Jennifer that there have been women in the past who wanted to be with them, but they couldn't because of how they function. They just couldn't do it. Danielle could be really wanting to do this, but they will see if she is actually able to. Nick made a few attempts in the past at polygamy that didn't work out for various reasons. Nick thinks most of it was due to the individuals not being honest with themselves about how okay they were with their arrangement. Jennifer says, even with where they are now with Danielle, she feels as if it might not be too soon. It might be just the right time. April thinks what pace they go with Danielle should be determined by her. It's determined by the person they meet. It should be about how things naturally develop. With Danielle, it feels natural, April says. To have Jenny come along, it felt like a miracle. And to have Danielle come along, it also feels like a miracle. So she knows it can happen and it's not impossible for someone else to come along and be a good fit. Nick feels they're on very solid ground with Danielle, and he believes Danielle is doing this as something permanent that she wants, and that's an important thing. Everyone agrees they are solid on Danielle, and they want Danielle to be a part of their unit. Nick says if Danielle is ready to move in with them right now, he'd be ready for her to move in. Next up are the Joneses. Tasha's mom, Teresa, is visiting and they don't get to see each other that often. So they're going out to lunch and Tasha will answer some of the questions her mom has for her today. Tasha isn't sure her mom truly accepts the lifestyle. They flash back to a scene of Tasha and her mom from a previous season where Tasha tells her mom it's hard to find somebody open to polygamy that's not religious about it. And her mom says, maybe because they don't want to join a cult. Tasha's mom still doesn't know that Tasha and Sidian have found someone that they've been dating for a few months, Ariel. And so Tasha is gonna spill the beans. Teresa asks where Sidian is right now, and Tasha tells her Sidian is in the Philippines. And she asks what took Sidian to the Philippines. And Tasha spills the beans that they've been dating Ariel. Tasha explains she knew Ariel before Sidian. She's known her for 4 or 5 years now, and when she went to the Philippines on her work trip, she met Ariel. Her mom asks, you met a wife? And Tasha explains she didn't know Ariel was a wife back then. Teresa, Tasha's mom, says, When Tasha told her that Sidian was in the Philippines, she was surprised. She knew Sidian was traveling, but she wasn't aware of why. She just assumed it was for work. She says what she knows about Tasha and Sidian's lifestyle is minimal. She isn't interested herself in polygamy. She's curious about it, but she also thinks that there is a lot of bad with the good. Tasha explains she hung out a lot with Ariel and she got to know her really well, and she talked to Ariel ever since. Teresa asks what made Ariel be open to this. Tasha explains Ariel has known her for so long, and she has known about the lifestyle for so long, and they've talked a bunch. So Tasha thinks it became appealing over time. After Ariel spoke to Tasha over time, and she saw how comfortable Tasha was with it, Ariel began to trust her. And her mom says, "So, you brought her into the cult?" And Tasha says, "It's not a cult." Her mom explains to Tasha, that's how they groom them. Tasha says, if it's a cult of two. And her mom points out 3 now. Teresa says, when Tasha was growing up, they lived in a family unit group. So Teresa lived with her brother and his wife and their children. So she believes polygamy is probably very similar to the lifestyle that Tasha grew up in. And Teresa thinks that's where Tasha got the core belief system that she has. Teresa asks Tasha if Ariel is serious, and Tasha thinks that Ariel will work out. Teresa asks if this turns into a wedding if Tasha gets married to Ariel too. Tasha explains she won't be marrying Ariel. Sidian will marry Ariel, and Sidian and Tasha are not legally married. But Sidian and Ariel would be legally married. Teresa points out that Tasha is putting herself on the back burner after somebody else. Good for Teresa, trying to support and protect her daughter. Tasha explains that Ariel spent months without Sidian, and she gets to be with Sidian every single day. Teresa says she doesn't understand why Sidian and Tasha want to live in a polygamous lifestyle. She says when Tasha first approached herself and her dad about living polygamy with another wife, and she suggested she would allow her husband to go and do that, and that they were both very comfortable with it, it took Teresa a long time to wrap her head around it or to even want to try to accept it. Her biggest concern is to make sure that this new relationship for Sidian doesn't put his old relationship with Tasha on the back burner. She says from the sound of it, Tasha and Sidian are trying to build a relationship together with Ariel. So if Sidian continually goes to see Ariel on his own, then it's Sidian building a relationship with Ariel and not all of them building a relationship together. Tasha explains it's more of a give and take than it seems. Teresa's other biggest concern is that one day Tasha ends up waking up and she realizes she did not want to make the decision that she did. Teresa says until she is proven otherwise, she truly believes polygamy is a cult. She believes it's one man controlling another woman and another woman and another woman. And most of the time, in my opinion, that's what it is. Next up are the Epps family. A few weeks ago, Marcus had his date with Janae and it didn't go well. Marcus didn't think he would ever hear from Janae again after dropping the polygamist bomb on her. Janae is in town on business and she agreed to meet Marcus for lunch and the TLC paycheck. And I'm hoping the TLC paycheck is the main reason she is there. Now, I type my script as I'm watching the show, so I am just hoping that this results in her ripping Marcus a new one at the end of it, but we'll see. Marcus says there's still this undeniable connection and vibe between them. So for Marcus, with Janae being so uneasy, Marcus wants to pitch to Janae the idea of getting together with Taryn and India because maybe they can sell polygamy better than he can. Marcus wants Janae to tell him how she feels. Janae says when they initially spoke and she told him this was bullshit and that it was crazy for him to fly her to Orlando to tell her the news that he's a polygamist, now she's not as upset anymore. It just is what it is. But she rocks with Marcus enough not to completely shut him out as a person. But this unit, his polygamist family, is a whole other situation. Marcus tells Janae the good part for him when he hears her say that is he thinks maybe this could go somewhere, and he is looking forward to Janae being in Florida again. He asks if he is picking up what Janae is putting down. Janae says, "We are here, let's just be here." Marcus pitches that it's important that he introduce Janae sooner rather than later to his wives. He thinks it's important to see how they all click or if Janae will even like his wives. Janae explains she's not sold on this situation. She hasn't even concerned herself with it. Janae says she just likes it being she and Marcus, and she doesn't know about this. This is another world, she says. Marcus asks Janae if she has sisters, and she has two. And Marcus says she would have a sister relationship with his wives. Janae disagrees. She asks Marcus what he thinks about how this affects his wives, having to share him. Marcus says it affects them, but not every day. Jealousy is a natural thing, so naturally there are jealous moments. Marcus says he imagines and thinks about what may be going through his wives' minds, and they will tell him, "Oh, tonight spend the night with sister because she had a bad day." They support the sexual relationship and the relationship in general. Marcus says you have multiple people who are checking for you and who have your back. You have the exact same thing in monogamy. You can call your friends, your sisters, your cousins, your aunts, your mother in monogamy. So this isn't a benefit of polygamy. Marcus wants to make it seem like a benefit to the women in the lifestyle, but the real benefit is him being able to access all kinds of cake. Marcus says the support in polygamy is like nothing else. He never imagined it would be like this. It's pretty dope for real, he says. Janae isn't impressed. She says, okay, reluctantly. Janae can't wrap her mind around it. And Marcus says that's why he wants Janae to meet his wives. She can ask them and they can tell her better than he can what they think and feel. Marcus tells Janae he gets her concerns, and that's why he feels it would help her to hear his wives' points of view. Janae isn't agreeing to it. Janae says Marcus gave her a bunch of selling points and she isn't sold on this situation. But she thinks it might be interesting to meet his wives, to get in their heads. So maybe hearing both sides would be good. Janae says more than anything, it's interesting. In my opinion, Janae has zero interest in being with Marcus or accepting polygamy. I think she is just curious what his wives will say. Plus, she is getting a TLC check if she stretches it out, I'm sure. She says it's interesting. The way you go to a zoo and watch an elephant exhibit to Janae, it's interesting in that way is the vibe that I get. I doubt she's open to it at all. She's just curious. Janae thinks maybe she will meet them. She says there's always something extra. There's always a hidden agenda with Marcus. Marcus says he feels like he doesn't bring people to his wives that they wouldn't like. Janae asks how many people Marcus has introduced to his wives, and Marcus says 2. He mentions Bina to Janae, the other woman he is dating. Janae damn near chokes on her drink, and Marcus explains he has known Bina for years, and she has known Taryn for years, and she has met India before, so that's a different situation than Janae and introducing somebody where he says, look, I like her, I want her, and I want you guys to like her too. Marcus says the vibe between he and Janae is so real. He really feels her. I think the only thing Janae is feeling is her drink. She can't suck it down fast enough the more Marcus opens his mouth. And the only thing Marcus is feeling is he wants that cake. Marcus says now he not only needs Taryn and India to meet Janae, He needs them to help him sell this lifestyle to Janae. Marcus thinks Janae clearly wants to move on to the next step. Is this man short and deaf and blind too to think that? Janae tells Marcus every time she sees him, she feels like he makes her blood pressure rise. And Marcus says he feels his blood pressure rise too. I bet he does. Next up are the Merryfields. Danielle's dad asks if they are nervous about Brazil, and Garrick hopes God meets them, blesses them, and gives peace to some of the emotional talks, and that they can all leave unified and with a ticket booked. Garrick and Danielle are having a call with Roberta today to touch base and to get a gauge of how things will be for their trip to Brazil. Danielle still has the same concerns that she and Sam discussed. Danielle feels like Garrick is not on the same page as her. Danielle says the call with Roberta is important today because she wants to make sure they are all moving forward to get Roberta here and that they all have a plan. Roberta is excited that Danielle and Garrick are coming. Garrick hopes they can see Roberta's mom when they visit. Garrick says a little over a year ago they met Roberta's mom in Mexico. Roberta says it will be important that Garrick and Danielle see her mom because they all need to have a conversation. Garrick wants to talk with Roberta and her mom about them booking Roberta's ticket. Based on what they have been through with Roberta in the past, Danielle has some apprehensions that mom won't take this in the best way. Roberta is all her mom has, and making that decision is not going to be easy. She has to let her daughter go, Danielle says. Danielle doesn't know if she feels reassured by this call. She wonders if maybe she is being pessimistic. She hopes not. She wants to think the best of Roberta. Garrick was crying during the call, and Roberta, in my opinion, barely showed emotions. And I think Danielle picks up on it. I think the conversation Roberta and her mom and family want to have is about Roberta not leaving, and the one Garrick and Danielle want to have is about buying a ticket. Next time on Seeking Sister Wife, Brenda, April, and Steve are together, and Brenda asks Steve if he went to the lot this morning, and Steve says they were there today putting the siding up, and Steve is ready to ask April to move in with them. Taryn, India, Janae, and Marcus are out for drinks. India cheers to them all dating the same man. Janae says it's their first time meeting and it's a little awkward. India tells Janae she is shocked that they are meeting, and Janae says she was definitely swindled into coming down. Taryn says Marcus was real about it, and Janae says she isn't cool with that. Garrick and Danielle make it to Brazil. Garrick says they have a whole lot riding on this trip. Once Roberta gets here, they will have some serious talks about booking the plane ticket. Sidian explains to Ariel, for this to work, they would have to bring her to the States, and within 90 days, they would have to be married. Ariel asks if Sidian means a fiancé visa, and Sidian says yes. Tasha and Sidian FaceTime, and she asks if he is thinking of proposing. And Sidian says he's thinking about it. Tasha asks Sidian if he thinks it's fast. Sidian feels pressure. He says it seems like there are so many things that could go wrong, but also so many things that could go right. A vacation in paradise meeting for the first time is a far cry from real life and really knowing a person. I would be visiting again and again and bringing Tasha a few times and then bringing Tasha and the kids over an extended period before I would consider proposing. Why rush it? I know travel is expensive, but would a divorce be better? Anyways, that does it for this episode. To my YouTube viewers, please like and subscribe. And if you like, let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I'll be back this week with the next episode of Book Club on the second half of Chapter 7 on Christine. And also look out this week for the next episode of my Sister Wives Rewatch, Season 16, Episode 2, 4 Wives, 3 Fires. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Bye.